Good evening, friends, and welcome back to The Haunted Tales. Tonight, we're heading deep into the frozen wilderness of Alaska, a place of endless snow, bone-cracking cold, and mysteries that most people never live to talk about. I'll be sharing with you 10 of the most chilling real-life horror stories from the last frontier. These aren't just campfire tales. These are accounts from emergency workers, bush pilots, researchers, and seasonal crews who stumbled into something that should never have been found. In Alaska, the darkness stretches for days. The cold can claim a life in minutes, and what lurks beyond the tree line often has no name. Some of these stories come from old journals and logs, others from recordings and reports that were never meant for the public. Each one is a frozen nightmare waiting to be unearthed. If this is your first time here, welcome to The Haunted Tales. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss when we bring you more true horror stories that will send a shiver straight down your spine. Now, bundle up, because we're about to step into Alaska's darkest secrets. I need to get this story out there because I can't keep it to myself anymore. My name is Marcus, and until 3 months ago, I worked as a communications technician for the Forest Service in northern Montana. I maintained the radio towers and repeaters scattered throughout the Glacier National Park backcountry. It was solitary work, which suited me fine. I'd always preferred the company of mountains and pine trees to people. The incident happened last October, during my final maintenance run before winter shut down the remote sites. I was working alone at Signal Tower 7, about 40 miles from the nearest road, accessible only by helicopter or a brutal 2-day hike. The tower sat on a ridge overlooking the Belly River Valley, and on clear days you could see the Canadian Rockies stretching endlessly north. I'd been dropped off that Tuesday morning with enough supplies for a 3-day job. The helicopter pilot, Jerry, was supposed to pick me up Friday afternoon, standard procedure. I'd done this same run dozens of times over the past 5 years. The first day went normally. I replaced some corroded coaxial cables, updated the battery bank, and ran diagnostics on the repeater equipment. The radio chatter was typical: park rangers checking in, search and rescue coordinating training exercises, weather reports. Nothing unusual. But Wednesday night, that's when things started getting strange. I was in my tent, maybe 50 yards from the tower, when I heard voices on my handheld radio. Not the usual professional radio traffic, but what sounded like casual conversation. 2 people, a man and a woman, talking quietly. I couldn't make out the words at first, just the cadence of normal speech. But something felt off about it. I turned up the volume and listened closer. The woman was saying something about being cold, about wanting to go home. The man's voice was reassuring, telling her they'd be okay, that someone would come for them, soon. Their voices had this hollow quality, like they were speaking from inside a cave or a deep well. I checked the frequency. It was coming through on the emergency channel. Protocol required me to respond to any transmission on that frequency, so I keyed up my radio. This is Forest Service Communications Unit 7. Please identify yourselves and your location. The voices stopped immediately. Dead silence for maybe 10 seconds, then static. I tried again, same response, just static. I figured maybe it was some hikers with a radio, possibly lost or in distress, but their equipment was malfunctioning. It happens. I logged the incident and tried to put it out of my mind. Thursday morning, I climbed the tower to replace the main antenna array. It's a 200-foot climb, and I was about halfway up when I heard those voices again, coming from my radio, clipped to my tool belt. This time they were clearer. The woman was crying, not sobbing, just quiet, steady tears in her voice. She kept saying, "It's so dark here." Why is it so dark? The man was trying to calm her, but his voice sounded strained, frightened. I stopped, climbing, and grabbed my radio. "Hello, this is Forest Service Communications. Can you hear me? What's your location?" Again, immediate silence. But this time, after the static cleared, I heard something else. Breathing. Slow, deliberate breathing, like someone was holding the radio close to their mouth. It lasted maybe 30 seconds, then cut out. My hands were shaking as I clipped the radio back to my belt. I've worked alone in the wilderness for years, and I'm not easily spooked, but something about those voices was deeply unsettling. They didn't sound like people in normal distress. They sounded lost in ways I couldn't articulate. I finished the antenna work and spent the rest of Thursday monitoring the radio frequencies, trying to triangulate where the transmission might be coming from. Based on signal strength and the fact that I was only receiving them on the mountaintop, they had to be relatively close, maybe within a few miles. But here's the thing. I knew that area intimately. There were no hiking trails within 10 miles of Signal Tower 7. The terrain was too rugged, too dangerous. If someone was lost out there, they were in serious trouble. I contacted Park Dispatch and reported possible lost hikers. They ran a check. No overdue hiking permits, no missing person reports, no emergency beacons activated in the area. They suggested the transmissions might be coming from across the border in Waterton Lakes National Park, but Canadian authorities reported nothing. Either. That night, I barely slept. Every few hours, I'd hear fragments of those voices. Sometimes they seemed to be having normal conversations about everyday things, what they'd eaten for dinner, concern about the weather. Other times, the woman would be crying, asking why. No one could find them, why it was always so cold. The man's voice started changing, too. By Thursday night, he sounded different. Tired, maybe sick. His words became harder to understand, slurred almost. Friday came, and I was packed and ready for Jerry to pick me up. But the weather had turned. Heavy clouds rolled in from the north, bringing the first real snow of the season. Jerry radioed that he couldn't fly in those conditions. The pickup was postponed to Monday, assuming the weather cleared. I wasn't happy about spending the weekend alone up there, but it wasn't my first weather delay. I had enough supplies, and the emergency shelter near the tower was well stocked. What worried me more were those voices on the radio. Friday night, they came through clearer than ever, and for the first time I could understand complete sentences. The woman said, "Marcus, can you hear us now?" My blood went cold. She'd used my name, my actual name. The man's voice followed, but it was wrong somehow, like he was speaking with his mouth full of cotton. "We've been trying to reach you, Marcus. We need help." I grabbed the radio with trembling hands. "Who is this? How do you know my name?" "We're lost, Marcus. We've been lost for so long. Can you see us? We can see your light." Looked around frantically. The only light was my lantern inside the tent. The tower's warning lights were flashing their regular pattern, but those were automated. "Where are you?" I asked. "Down here. In the dark." "It's so cold, Marcus. Why won't you help us?" That's when I made a decision that still haunts me. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed the tower. If someone was out there, I needed to see them, to understand what was happening. From the top of the tower, I could see for miles in every direction. The snow was falling steadily, and my flashlight beam cut through the darkness across the valley below. That's when I saw it. About half a mile down the slope, there was a light. A faint yellowish glow, like a campfire or lantern. It was exactly where the voices seemed to be coming from. I keyed my radio. "I can see your light. Stay where you are. I'm coming down." But as I said those words, the light went out. Just vanished. The woman's voice came back, but now it sounded different, angry. "Why did you lie to us, Marcus? You can see us, but you won't help us." "I'm trying to help. Where did your light go?" "There is no light, Marcus. There's only darkness. There's only cold. Why won't you come down here with us?" I spent the rest of the night in the tower watching the valley, but I never saw the light again. The voices continued sporadically, sometimes pleading, sometimes angry, sometimes just crying, always using my name. Monday morning, Jerry arrived, with the first clear weather. As we loaded my gear into the helicopter, I told him about the voices, about the light I'd seen. He listened patiently, then shared something that made my stomach drop. "Marcus," he said, "you know about the Kellerman family, right? Happened about 15 years ago, before you started working up here." I didn't know. Bob and Linda Kellerman. Experienced hikers from Calgary. They went missing somewhere in this area during an early October snowstorm. Never found them. Search and rescue looked for weeks. Jerry paused, checking his instruments. Bob was an amateur radio operator. always carried a handheld with him. As we lifted off, I looked down at the valley where I'd seen that light. In the daylight, I could see how impossible it would be for anyone to survive down there for 15 years. The terrain was a maze of cliffs, deadfall, and impassable ravines. But I swear I could still hear them on my radio, faintly, even as we flew away. Linda's voice, asking why it was so dark, why no one would help them. Bob's voice getting weaker, harder to understand. I requested a transfer the next week. Told my supervisor I wanted to work closer to civilization. I never mentioned the real reason, but sometimes, on quiet nights, I still tune my radio to that emergency frequency. And sometimes I still hear them. Linda and Bob Kellerman, lost somewhere in the darkness below Signal Tower 7, wondering why no one will help them, why it's always so cold. The thing that keeps me awake at night isn't whether what I experienced was real or not. It's the question that Linda asked me that last night. Why won't you come down here with us? Because part of me, a part I don't like to acknowledge, had wanted to. Standing on that tower, looking down into the darkness, I'd felt an almost overwhelming urge to climb down, to find them, to help them. And I wonder if that's how it happened to them 15 years ago. If they heard voices in the darkness, voices calling for help. And if they went down into that valley to answer those calls, never realizing that the voices they were hearing weren't the ones calling to them. They were the ones they were about to become. I still work for the Forest Service, but I stay in town. Now. Office work, safe work. But every October, when the first snow starts falling in the mountains, I think about Signal Tower 7, about the voices in the darkness. My name is Sarah, and I worked as a 911 dispatcher in Crow Falls, Wyoming for 8 years. It's a small town, maybe 2,800 people, surrounded by endless prairie and badlands. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and a busy night means 3 calls instead of 1. I loved the job because I genuinely wanted to help people, and in a town that small, you really felt like you made a difference. What I'm about to tell you happened during my overnight shift last December. I still have the audio recordings, though. I've never let anyone else hear them. I'm not even sure I should be sharing this story, but I can't carry it alone anymore. It was December 15th, a Tuesday night. We'd gotten about 6 inches of fresh snow, and the temperature was sitting at -12 degrees. The roads were mostly clear, but it was the kind of cold that made your car engine hesitate and your breath freeze in your lungs. Perfect night to stay inside, which is exactly what most of Crow Falls was doing. I'd been on shift since 11 p.m., and by 2 a.m. I'd only handled 2 calls, a fender bender on Main Street and a welfare check on old Mrs. Patterson, who was fine, but had forgotten to check in with her daughter. Standard stuff. That's when I got the first call. The phone rang, and when I answered, there was silence for maybe 5 seconds. Then a woman's voice, very quiet, almost whispering, 911? I need help. This is 911, what's your emergency? I'm lost. My car broke down and I don't know where I am. It's so cold. Her voice had this quality that immediately put me on edge. She sounded terrified, but also distant, like she was speaking from very far away. Okay, ma'am. I can help you. What's your name? Jennifer. Jennifer Walsh. I started typing her information into the system. Jennifer, are you injured? No, I don't think so, but I've been walking for hours. I can't feel my feet anymore. The connection was crystal clear, which was unusual. Cell service in the Badlands around Crow Falls was spotty at best, but she sounded like she was calling from right next door. Jennifer, can you see any landmarks? Road signs, buildings, anything that might help me locate you? There's nothing. Just snow and darkness. Wait. I think I see lights ahead. Should I walk toward them? Yes, if you can see lights, that's... Good. Head toward them, but stay on the line with me. I'm going to dispatch an officer to help find you. I put her on hold and radioed Officer Mike Hendricks, who was patrolling the north side of town. Mike had been with the department for 15 years and knew every back road and ranch in the county. Mike, I've got a stranded motorist, possibly, in the Badlands. Woman named Jennifer Walsh. Car broke down. She's on foot. Copy that, Sarah. Any idea on location? Working on it. She mentioned seeing lights ahead. I clicked back to Jennifer. Jennifer, are you still there? Yes. I'm walking toward the lights now. They're getting closer. Good. Can you describe what you're seeing? It looks like maybe a house. There are several lights, warm yellow lights, like windows. I felt a little relief. Probably the Kowalski Ranch or maybe the old Henderson place. Both were isolated, but at least she'd found shelter. Jennifer, that's great. When you reach the house, knock on the door. Most folks around here will help a stranded motorist. Okay, I'm almost there now. There was a pause, then her voice came back, but something had changed. She sounded confused, maybe frightened. Sarah? The lights, they're not from a house. What do you mean? They're just lights. In the middle of nowhere, like street lights, but there's no street. No buildings. Nothing. The hair on my arms stood up. That didn't make sense. Jennifer, stay calm. Can you describe exactly what you're seeing? There are 6 lights, maybe 7. They're arranged in a line, about 10 feet apart. They're humming, like electrical transformers, but there's nothing else here. No power lines, no buildings, just these lights in the snow. I'd lived in this area my whole life, and I knew every ranch, every oil pump, every piece of infrastructure for 50 miles. There were no mysterious lights in the Badlands. Jennifer, I need you to stay exactly where you are. Don't go near those lights. I'm sending someone to find you right now. But I'm so cold, Sarah. The lights are warm. I can feel the heat from here. No, Jennifer. Please just wait for help. I radioed. Mike again. Mike, I need you to check every road north of town. Look for car trouble, footprints in the snow, anything. This woman is in real distress. On it, Sarah. What's her phone number? I can try to ping her location. I asked Jennifer for her number, and she gave it to me. Mike ran it through our system. No such number existed. Not in Wyoming, not anywhere. Jennifer, I said carefully, the number you gave me isn't coming up in our system. Can you double-check it for me? She repeated the same number. Then she said something that made my blood freeze. Sarah, I need to tell you something. I'm not supposed to be calling you. What do you mean? I tried calling 911 3 hours ago when my car first broke down, but I couldn't get through. My phone said there was no service. But now I can call you perfectly. Jennifer, you're scaring me. Where exactly did your car break down? There was a long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Flat, emotionless. Mile marker 47 on County Road 18, about 3 miles north of the old grain elevator. I knew that area. County Road 18 ran through some of the most desolate country in our jurisdiction. But here's the thing. There was no mile marker 47 on County Road 18. The road only ran for about 30 miles, and it was barely maintained past mile marker 25. Jennifer, are you sure about that location? I'm looking right at the marker, Sarah. It says 47. I had Mike check County Road 18 anyway. He drove the entire length, found no broken down vehicles, no footprints, no sign of anyone. But he did report something strange. Sarah, there's something weird out here. About mile 25, where the road pretty much ends, there are these old concrete posts. Looks like there used to be streetlights here, maybe decades ago. The posts are still there, but no lights. My hands were shaking as I clicked back to Jennifer. Jennifer, are you still by those lights? Yes. They're so warm, Sarah. I think I'm going to rest here for a while. No, Jennifer, don't go near those lights, please. It's okay, Sarah. I'm not cold anymore. Actually, I feel wonderful. The lights are beautiful. They're singing to me. Singing? Can't you hear it? It's the most beautiful sound I've ever heard. All I could hear was static on the line, but underneath it, something else. A low humming, almost like music. But not quite. Jennifer, please. You need to get away from there. Walk back the way you came. I can't, Sarah. I don't want to. It's so warm here, so peaceful. Her voice was fading, becoming more distant. Jennifer? Jennifer, can you hear me? The line went dead. I tried calling the number back. It rang once, then gave me a recording saying the number was not in service. I had Mike search the area again at dawn, brought in a state police helicopter, even called in search and rescue teams from 3 counties. We never found any trace of Jennifer Walsh, her car, or anything else. But here's what really haunts me. After that night, I started researching the area around County Road 18. Turns out, back in 1987, there was a plan to extend the road another 20 miles north and install streetlights along a new commercial development. They actually started construction, poured concrete foundations, installed electrical infrastructure, even put up 7 streetlights. But the development fell through due to some environmental concerns, and the whole project was abandoned. The county removed the lights and most of the electrical equipment, but they left the concrete posts. I found newspaper articles about it, old county planning documents, even some photographs. 7 streetlights, arranged in a line, exactly 10 feet apart. The last photograph was taken in December 1987, just before they were removed. But here's the thing that keeps me awake at night. I found one more article from December 23, 1987. A small item buried on page 6 of the Crow Falls Gazette. Local woman missing. Jennifer Walsh, 34, of Casper, Wyoming, was reported missing after her car was found abandoned on County Road 18. Walsh was last seen December 15th, traveling to visit family in Crow Falls for the holidays. Despite extensive searches, no trace of Walsh has been found. Anyone with information is asked to contact local authorities. December 15, 1987, exactly 35 years to the day before I received that call. I quit the dispatcher job 2 weeks later, told my supervisor I was moving closer to family, which wasn't entirely a lie. But the real reason was that I couldn't handle the phone ringing at 2 a.m. anymore. Couldn't handle the possibility of hearing that voice again. Because I keep wondering, if Jennifer Walsh disappeared in 1987, who was I talking to that night? And more importantly, every December 15th for the past 35 years, has some dispatcher in Crow Falls been getting that same call? I still live in Wyoming, just in a bigger city now. But sometimes, on cold December nights, I'll be driving past empty fields and I'll see lights in the distance. Lights that don't seem to belong to anything, just glowing in the darkness. And I'll remember Jennifer's voice, telling me how warm those lights were, how beautiful they sounded when they sang to her. Part of me wants to drive toward those lights, to see what she saw, to understand what happened to her. But I never do, because I think I know what I'd find out there in the cold and darkness. My name is Danny Kowalski, and I've been driving long-haul trucks for 23 years. I've hauled everything from lumber to live cattle across 48 states, and I thought I'd seen it all. Remote highways at 3 a.m., breakdowns in the middle of nowhere, weather that could kill you if you weren't careful. But nothing prepared me for what happened on the Dalton Highway in Alaska last February. For those who don't know, the Dalton Highway, or the Hall Road as we call it, runs 414 miles from Fairbanks up to Deadhorse on the Arctic Ocean. It's one of the most dangerous roads in North America. No cell service for most of it. Temperatures that can hit 60 below, and if your truck breaks down in the wrong spot, you might not see another vehicle for days. I was hauling drilling equipment up to the North Slope oil fields. It was my 3rd run up the Dalton that winter, so I knew what I was getting into. The weather forecast called for clear skies and minus 30 degrees, practically tropical for February up there. I left Fairbanks at 6 p.m. on a Thursday, planning to make the run in about 12 hours with a few rest stops. The first 200 miles went smooth. I passed through Coldfoot, the last real town before the final push north, around midnight. Grabbed some coffee, checked my rig, and headed into the most remote stretch of the highway. That's when things started getting strange. About 50 miles north of Coldfoot, I noticed headlights in my mirrors. Another trucker, probably making the same run. On the Dalton, you don't see many vehicles, so when you do, it's almost comforting. We're all in it together up there, but these headlights were odd. They stayed exactly the same distance behind me, no matter if I sped up or slowed down. Most truckers either pass you or fall back, depending on their schedule and load. This guy just matched my speed perfectly. I tried raising him on CB Channel 19. Northbound truck behind the Peterbilt with the drilling equipment. You got your ears on? No response, just static. I figured maybe his radio was busted, which isn't uncommon in that cold. Electronics fail all the time up there, so I kept driving, checking my mirrors every few minutes. Those headlights never wavered, never got closer or farther away. Around 2 a.m., I hit one of the mandatory rest areas, just a wide spot in the road where truckers can pull over and check their rigs. I needed to inspect my load chains anyway. The cold makes metal contact, and loose chains can be deadly. I pulled into the rest area and stopped. The truck behind me drove right past without even slowing down. I got a good look at it as it went by. An older Kenworth, dark blue or black, covered in road salt and ice. Nothing unusual about it, except I couldn't see the driver. The cab was dark, but that wasn't necessarily weird. Lots of guys drive with just their running lights on to save battery. I finished checking my load and got back on the road. Within 5 minutes, those same headlights appeared in my mirrors again, keeping that exact same distance. Now I was getting annoyed. There's an unwritten code among long-haul drivers, especially on dangerous roads like the Dalton. You look out for each other, you communicate, you don't play games. This guy was breaking that code. I tried the CB again. Dark Kenworth following the Peterbilt, what's your 20? Still nothing. But then, maybe 10 minutes later, my CB crackled to life. A voice, distorted by static. Peterbilt driver, this is the Kenworth. I've got a situation. Go ahead, Kenworth. What's your problem? My engine temperature is running hot. I'm going to need to stop soon, but I don't want to break down alone out here. Mind if I follow you to the next rest area? That made sense. Breaking down alone on the Dalton in February was essentially a death sentence. Copy that, Kenworth. Next rest area is about 30 miles north. I'll wait for you there. Appreciate it, driver. What's your name? Danny. Danny Kowalski. You? There was a pause, filled with static. Then, Mike Henderson. We drove in convoy for the next 30 miles, and I felt better knowing I was helping a fellow driver. The Dalton can be brutal, but truckers stick together. The next rest area was just another wide spot, but it had a wind shelter and an emergency phone. I pulled in and waited for Mike to join me, but when he drove past the rest area entrance, I flashed my lights and honked my horn. He kept going. I grabbed my CB. Mike, you missed the rest area. It's right here. His voice came back, but something was off about it. Hollow, like he was talking from inside a tunnel. Thanks, Danny, but I think I can make it to the next one. My temperature gauge is reading normal now. You sure? We're here now. Might as well check your coolant. Negative. Thanks anyway. And he was gone, those headlights disappearing around a curve ahead. I sat there for a few minutes, confused and a little irritated. If his engine wasn't overheating anymore, why had he been following me for the past 2 hours? But then I figured maybe the cold had fixed whatever sensor was giving him the false readings. Happens all the time. I got back on the road, but now I was alone again. No headlights in my mirrors, just empty highway stretching north through the darkness. About an hour later, I came around a long curve and saw something that made my stomach drop. Red flares on the road ahead, and the silhouette of a truck jackknifed across both lanes. I slowed down and grabbed my CB. Any driver northbound on the Dalton, there's been an accident at mile marker 267. Truck blocking the roadway. No response. Pulled up to the accident scene and put on my hazard lights. It was the dark Kenworth that had been following me. It was lying on its side, the trailer twisted at an impossible angle. The cab was partially crushed. I grabbed my flashlight and winter gear and climbed down from my truck. The cold hit me like a physical blow. Probably 45 below with the wind chill. I ran to the overturned cab, expecting to find Mike, injured or worse. The cab was empty. Not just empty. It looked like it had been empty for a long time. The seats were covered in frost, the windows were iced over from the inside, and there was no sign that anyone had been in there recently. No coffee cups, no personal items, no indication of human presence, but that was impossible. I'd been talking to Mike on the CB less than an hour ago. I searched around the accident scene, thinking maybe he'd been thrown from the cab or had climbed out and was seeking shelter. But there were no footprints in the snow except my own. No blood, no signs of anyone walking away from the crash. I called it in on the emergency phone, and while I waited for help to arrive, I climbed back into my cab to warm up. That's when I noticed something that made my blood freeze. My CB was crackling with a conversation. Two voices, both distorted by static. Peterbilt driver, this is the Kenworth. I've got a situation. It was the same conversation I'd had with Mike. An hour earlier, word for word. But Mike's truck was lying destroyed 50 yards away, and had obviously been there for much longer than an hour. Go ahead, Kenworth. What's your problem? And there was my own voice, responding just like before. Turned off the CB, but I could still hear the conversation continuing faintly, like it was coming from somewhere else. The same words, the same timing, playing out exactly as it had before. When the state police finally arrived 3 hours later, they told me something that confirmed my worst fears. The truck had been there for at least 2 weeks, based on the ice accumulation and the condition of the wreckage. The driver had been identified as Mike Henderson, 52, from Anchorage. He'd been hauling auto parts north when he lost control in a blizzard and jackknifed. They'd found his body a quarter-mile from the wreck, frozen solid. He'd tried to walk for help, but didn't make it far in the sub-zero temperatures. I told the U-1 investigating officer about the CB conversation, about the truck following me. He listened patiently, then explained that extreme cold can cause radio equipment to malfunction in strange ways. Sometimes old transmissions get stuck in relay towers and play back later. Electronic echoes, he called them. But that didn't explain the headlights I'd seen, or how Mike had known my name when I hadn't told him yet during that recorded conversation. I finished my run to Deadhorse, but I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. When I got back to Fairbanks, I did some research. Mike Henderson had been driving the Dalton Highway for 12 years. He knew that road better than almost anyone. But I found something else in the newspaper archives. Over the past 5 years, there had been 4 other incidents on the Dalton Highway. Truckers reporting being followed by vehicles that later turned out to have been wrecked for days or weeks. In each case, the following driver had contacted them by CB, asking for help or companionship on that lonely road. In each case, the following driver was already dead. I don't drive the Dalton Highway anymore. I told my dispatcher I wanted warmer routes, southern runs. He thought I was getting soft in my old age, and maybe I am. But sometimes when I'm driving long stretches of empty highway at night, I'll check my mirrors and see headlights following at that same perfect distance. And sometimes my CB will crackle to life with a voice asking for help, asking not to be left alone on the dark road. When that happens, I turn off my radio and drive straight to the nearest truck stop, no matter how far it is. Because I've learned something about those lonely highways that cross the empty places of the world. The dead don't always know they're dead. And sometimes they just want someone to talk to during the long, cold journey to wherever it is they're really going. My name is Tom Bradley, and I've been a park ranger at Olympic National Park in Washington for 16 years. I've seen everything the Pacific Northwest wilderness can throw at you. 100-foot-tall trees that have been growing since before Columbus, rainfall that can drown you standing up, and fog so thick you can't see your own feet. But what happened to me last September on Forest Service Road 2318 still keeps me awake at night. I was doing a routine patrol in the Quinault River Valley, checking on some remote campsites and monitoring trail conditions after a week of heavy rain. It's beautiful country out there, temperate rainforest that feels older than time itself, with massive Douglas firs and Sitka spruces draped in moss like something out of a fairy tale. But it's also easy to get turned around, especially when the weather closes in. I'd been driving Forest Service Road 2318 for about an hour, heading deeper into the backcountry, when I noticed a car parked on the shoulder ahead. A silver Honda Civic, maybe 10 years old, with Washington plates. It looked out of place. Most people who venture this far into the forest drive trucks or SUVs. The road gets pretty rough past mile marker 15. I pulled up behind the Honda and got out to investigate. Standard procedure when you find an abandoned vehicle in the wilderness. Could be hikers who broke down, could be someone in distress, or it could be stolen and dumped. You never know. The car was locked, but I could see inside through the windows. A woman's purse on the passenger seat, a coffee cup in the holder, a Washington State Parks day pass hanging from the rearview mirror. The engine was cold, but not ice cold. Probably been sitting there for a few hours, maybe since early morning. I ran the plates through dispatch. The car belonged to Rebecca Martinez, 28, from Olympia. No outstanding warrants, no reports of the vehicle being stolen. I radioed in the location and started looking around for signs of where she might have gone. That's when I found the footprints, a single set of sneaker prints leading from the driver's side door into the forest. They were clear in the soft earth beside the road, size 7 or 8, women's running shoes. The prints headed straight into the woods, which was strange because there was no trail there, just dense underbrush and old-growth timber. I followed the prints for about 50 yards before they disappeared on a patch of rocky ground. That's not unusual in forest terrain, but it meant I'd lost her trail. I called out, "Hello, Forest Service! Is anyone out there?" My voice echoed off the massive tree trunks, but there was no response. Just the sound of water dripping from the canopy and the distant rush of the Quinault River. I went back to my truck and radioed dispatch again. "I've got a possible missing hiker on Forest Service Road 2318, mile marker 17. Vehicle belongs to Rebecca Martinez. I'm going to search the immediate area." "Copy that, Tom. Want me to call out search and rescue?" "Not yet. Let me do a preliminary search first. She might be close by." I spent the next 2 hours combing the forest around her car, following deer, trails and creek beds, calling her name every few minutes. The woods were eerily quiet. No birds, no squirrels. Just that constant dripping sound that rainforests make. Even for the Olympic Peninsula, it felt unusually still. Around 4 p.m., I was about to call for backup when I heard something that made me stop dead in my tracks. A woman's voice, very faint, calling, "Help me." It seemed to be coming from deeper, in the forest, maybe a quarter mile from the road. I grabbed my radio and emergency pack and headed toward the sound. "Rebecca Martinez. This is the Forest Service. Keep calling out so I can find you. Help me. I'm lost." Her voice was clearer now, but something about it bothered me. In 16 years of search and rescue, I've heard a lot of people calling for help. They're usually panicked, breathless, desperate. Rebecca's voice was calm, almost matter-of-fact. I followed the sound deeper into the forest, marking my path, with reflective tape so I could find my way back. The trees were massive here, some of them 8 feet in diameter and probably 200 feet tall. The canopy was so thick that even in mid-afternoon, it felt like twilight. "Rebecca, I'm coming toward you. Keep talking." "I'm here. I can't find my way back to the road." But as I got closer to where her voice seemed to be coming from, something wasn't right. The sound was moving. Every time I thought I was getting close, her voice would come from a different direction. After an hour of this, I was getting frustrated and a little worried. The sun was starting to set, and I didn't want to be stumbling around in the dark forest. Worse, my radio was starting to crackle with static. The trees were interfering with the signal. "Rebecca, I need you to stay in one place. Don't move. I'm going to find you, but you have to stop moving." "I'm not moving. I've been sitting by this big tree for hours." That's when I realized something that made my skin crawl. I was hearing her voice clearly, but when I called back to her, there was a delay before she responded. Not like she was thinking about what to say, but like she was hearing my voice from a distance and it was taking time to reach her. But I could hear her perfectly clearly. I stopped walking and really listened. Her voice was coming from all around me, like it was bouncing off the trees or like there were multiple sources. "Rebecca, I need you to do something for me. When I count to 3, I want you to yell as loud as you can. 1, 2, 3. Help. Me! I'm lost!" But it wasn't a yell. It was the same calm, clear voice I'd been hearing all afternoon. And now I was sure. It was coming from at least 3 different directions. I keyed my radio, hoping for a clear signal. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Bradley. I need immediate backup on Forest Service Road 2318. Something's not right out here." The radio crackled with static, but I could make out. "Say again, Tom." Breaking up. That's when I heard Rebecca's voice. Again, but this time it was different. Closer, much closer. "Help me. I'm lost." It was coming from directly behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing there except trees and shadows. My heart was pounding. and for the first time in my career, I felt genuinely scared. "Rebecca? Where are you?" "I'm right here." The voice was so close it sounded like she was standing next to me. I could practically feel her breath on my neck, but there was nobody there. I turned on my flashlight and swept it around the immediate area. Nothing, just moss-covered trees and ferns. But then my light caught something that made my blood freeze. Footprints, the same sneaker pattern I'd followed from the car, but they were everywhere, circling trees, doubling back on themselves, creating an impossible maze of tracks that seemed to go in every direction at once. Some of the prints were fresh. Others looked days old, and some looked much older than that. "Help me. I'm lost." The voice came from above me. I looked up and saw nothing but branches disappearing into darkness. "Help me. I'm lost." From my left. "Help me. I'm lost." From my right. "Help me. I'm lost." From behind me again. I was surrounded by Rebecca Martinez's voice, calling from everywhere and nowhere, echoing through the forest like she was trapped in the trees themselves. That's when I ran. I followed my reflective tape markers back toward the road, stumbling through the underbrush, branches tearing at my uniform. Behind me, Rebecca's voice continued calling for help, but now it sounded different. Angry, maybe, or frustrated. "Don't leave me. I'm lost. Help me." I made it back to Forest Service Road 2318 just as full darkness fell. Both vehicles were still there, my truck and Rebecca's Honda. I sat in my cab for a few minutes, trying to calm down and figure out what the hell had just happened. I radioed dispatch and requested a full search and rescue team for First Light. Then I sat there all night, keeping watch on that Honda Civic, listening to the forest. Around 3 a.m. I heard her voice again, faint but clear. "Help me. I'm lost." It was coming from inside her car. The search and rescue team arrived at dawn with dogs and volunteers. We combed that forest for 3 days, covering a 5-mile radius from where Rebecca's car was found. The dogs couldn't pick up a scent trail beyond the first 50 yards, the same place where I'd lost her footprints. The third day, we found something. About 2 miles from the road, in a grove of ancient cedars, there was a small clearing. The ground was covered with the same sneaker prints I'd been seeing, but these were old, weeks old, maybe months. They formed a perfect circle around the largest tree in the grove, like someone had been walking around and around it for hours. At the base of the tree, we found Rebecca's cell phone. The battery was dead, but when we charged it up back at the station, we found something that still gives me nightmares. Her last dozen calls were all to 911, placed over the course of several hours on the day she disappeared. But according to dispatch records, they never received any emergency calls from her number that day. The calls were all in her voicemail system, though. We listened to them. 1. "I need help. I'm lost in the forest and I can't find my car." 9-1. "Please, I've been walking for hours. I think I'm going in circles." 911. "Why isn't anyone answering? I need help." The calls got progressively more desperate, more confused. In the last one, made at 11:47 p.m., nearly 12 hours after her car was estimated to have been abandoned. Her voice was barely recognizable. 1. "I can't. I don't know where I am anymore. The trees keep moving. The path keeps changing. Why won't anyone help me?" And then, just before the call ended, "Wait, I can hear someone calling. Someone else is lost out here." My name is Alex Chen, and until last month I was a meteorologist stationed at Mount Washington Observatory in New Hampshire. For those who don't know, Mount Washington has some of the most extreme weather in the world. We've recorded wind speeds over 230 miles per hour, and the temperature can drop to 60 below with the wind chill. It's a place where the weather doesn't just threaten you, it actively tries to kill you. I'd been working at the observatory for 3 years, taking shifts in the weather station that sits on the summit at 6,288 feet. It's isolated work. The station is only accessible by hiking trail in summer or snowcat in winter. During the worst storms, you can be completely cut off from the outside world for days at a time. What happened occurred during my solo shift last January. I was scheduled for a week-long rotation, which meant 7 days alone on the summit, taking hourly weather readings and maintaining the equipment. It's not a job for everyone. The isolation gets to some people, especially in winter when the mountain is shrouded in clouds for days and you can't see 10 feet in any direction. I arrived at the station on a Monday afternoon via snowcat. The weather was relatively calm, only about 40-mile-per-hour winds, temperature at -15, practically tropical for Mount Washington in January. The previous observer, Janet, briefed me on the equipment status and caught the snow. Cat back down the mountain. By Tuesday evening, the weather had turned nasty. We were getting hit by a major nor'easter with winds gusting over 120 miles per hour and driving snow so thick I couldn't see the instrument tower 30 feet away. The temperature dropped to -38, and with the wind chill, it was approaching -80 degrees. Lethal exposure conditions. That's when I started hearing the knocking. At first, I thought it was just the wind. When you get winds over 100 miles per hour, they make sounds you wouldn't believe. Screaming, howling, sometimes like voices calling out. The building itself creaks and groans like it's being torn apart. I'd heard it all before, but this was different. It was rhythmic. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks, pause. Always the same pattern, always from the south wall of the building. I checked the weather instruments. Wind gusts were hitting 140 miles per hour from the northwest, but the knocking was coming from the opposite direction. That didn't make meteorological sense. Around midnight, the knocking got louder, more insistent. I put on my extreme weather gear and went outside to check the south wall, thinking maybe some equipment had come loose and was banging against the building. The moment I stepped outside, the cold hit me like a physical blow. Even with all my gear, I could feel the warmth being sucked out of my body. The wind was so strong I had to hold on to the safety rope just to stay upright. I made it to the south wall and checked every piece of equipment, every cable, every mounting bracket. Everything was secure. But as I stood there in the screaming wind, I heard something that made no sense at all. The knocking was coming from inside the wall, not from something hitting the outside of the building, but from within the wall itself. Like someone was trapped inside the structure, knocking on the interior surface. I got back inside as fast as I could and tried to rationalize what I'd heard. Old buildings make strange noises in extreme weather. Ice can form in weird places and create unusual sounds. But I'd been working in that building for 3 years, and I'd never heard anything like it. The knocking continued all night. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks, pause. So regular, you could set a watch by it. By Wednesday morning, the storm had intensified even more. We were getting wind gusts over 160 miles per hour, strong enough to literally blow a person off the mountain. The temperature had dropped to -42, making it one of the coldest nights I'd experienced on the summit. But the knocking had stopped. I felt relieved until I started doing my morning equipment check. That's when I noticed something that made my skin crawl. On the inside of the south wall, right where I'd been hearing the knocking, there were marks in the frost that had formed on the interior surface. Not random ice patterns, but deliberate marks, like someone had been scratching at the wall from the inside. The marks spelled out letters, HELP. Stared at those letters for a long time, trying to come up with a rational explanation. Condensation patterns can create strange shapes. Temperature differentials can cause ice to form in unusual ways. But I'd never seen frost naturally form letters before. I took photographs of the marks, then scraped the frost away. Within an hour, as more moisture in the air condensed and froze, the same letters appeared again. HELP. That afternoon, I radioed down to base camp to report the unusual ice formations. The supervisor, Mike Rodriguez, listened to my description and told me what I'd expected to hear. "Alex, you're dealing with some of the most extreme weather on the planet up there. Ice does weird things. Temperature changes can create all kinds of optical effects. Don't let the isolation get to you." But that night, the knocking started again. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks, pause. And this time, it wasn't just coming from the south wall. It was coming from all around the building. I sat in the center of the main room, listening to the sound move around the structure like someone was walking around the outside of the building, knocking on the walls as they went. But that was impossible. In 160-mile-per-hour winds and -40-degree temperatures, no living thing could survive outside for more than a few minutes. Thursday morning, I found more frost letters. Not just help on the south wall, but words on every wall. Cold. Dark. Lost. Please. And on the north wall, something that made my hands shake as I photographed it. Alex. Whatever was happening knew my name. I tried radioing base camp again, but the storm was interfering with communications. I could only get through intermittently, and when I tried to explain what was happening, the static made it impossible to have a coherent conversation. That's when I started going through the station's logbooks, looking for any mention of similar phenomena. The weather station has been operating since 1932, and we keep detailed records of everything that happens on the mountain. I found it in a logbook entry from February 1978, day 4 of solo rotation. Severe blizzard conditions, winds 150 plus mph, temperature -39. Observer reports unusual knocking sounds from building walls during storm. Frost formations on interior walls appear to show letter-like patterns. Phenomena ceased when weather improved. Recommend psychological evaluation for extended solo rotations during extreme weather events. Supervisor J. Patterson. The observer's name was David Chen. My grandfather. I'd known that my grandfather had worked at Mount Washington Observatory before I was born, but I'd never read his detailed reports. He died when I was 10, and my family had never talked much about his time on the mountain. But there was more. I kept searching through the records and found similar entries from 1952, 1963, 1985, and 1999, always during the worst winter storms, always during solo rotations, always the same pattern. Knocking sounds, frost letters, phenomena ceasing when the weather improved, and in every case, the observer was named Chen, my great-grandfather in 1952, my grandfather in 1978, a cousin I'd never met in 1985, my uncle in 1999. Thursday night, the knocking became constant. Not 3 knocks and a pause, but continuous hammering from every wall. Like dozens of people were trapped inside the building's structure, all pounding to get out. The frost letters appeared faster now, covering every interior surface with words. I could barely read in the dim emergency lighting. Help us! So cold. Can't leave. Trapped. And then, on Friday morning, I found something that made me understand what was really happening. On the east wall, written in fresh frost, were 2 words. Welcome home. I spent Friday morning going through more records, this time focusing specifically on the Chen family entries. What I found made me sick with terror. My great-grandfather, David Chen Sr., had died during his rotation in 1952. The official report said he'd suffered a heart attack during the storm, but his body wasn't found until the weather cleared 3 days later. He was discovered inside the station, frozen solid. But the strange thing was his position. He was standing against the south wall with his hands pressed against the surface, like he'd been trying to push his way through. My grandfather, David, Jr., had also died on the mountain during his 1978 rotation. Same circumstances, found frozen against a wall after the storm passed, hands pressed against the interior surface like he'd been trying to escape. The cousin in 1985, my uncle in 1999, same thing. All found dead after extreme weather events, all positioned against walls in ways that suggested they'd been trying to break through the building's structure. And according to the records, each of them had reported the same phenomena I was experiencing. Knocking sounds, frost letters, voices calling their names. That's when I realized the truth. The Chen family wasn't just prone to hallucinations during extreme weather. We were being called by something on that mountain, something that had been collecting us one by one over the decades. Friday night, the storm reached its peak intensity. Wind gusts hit 180 miles per hour, the strongest I'd ever recorded. The temperature dropped to -47 degrees, creating a wind chill of -96. The building shook so violently I thought it might collapse, and that's when I heard the voices. I don't usually tell people this story because, honestly, I still can't explain it myself. I've been a truck driver for over 20 years, and if there's one thing I know, it's roads. I know how they feel under the wheels, the way the air changes depending on where you are, how you can sense when you're not alone out there. And I'll swear to my dying day that something happened to me on an old stretch of highway in Alaska that I still don't understand. It was winter, and anyone who's ever driven through Alaska in December knows how brutal it gets. The cold doesn't just sting your face, it gets into your bones. The kind of cold where if you stop moving for too long, you start to wonder if you'll ever get warm again. I'd taken a contract to haul some equipment from Anchorage up to Fairbanks. Not unusual, but the company gave me a route I hadn't been on in years. An older highway, less maintained, but supposedly quicker since there was some construction on the main route. I should have known better. Quick doesn't always mean safe, and when you're alone with nothing but snow and ice around you, safe is all that matters. But money's money, and I figured I could handle it. The thing about driving up there is, the silence becomes its own kind of sound. You don't hear cars or people, sometimes not even animals. Just wind sweeping across the snow, like whispers. At first it's peaceful, but the longer you're out there, the more that silence presses down on you, like it's alive and waiting. The first weird thing happened about 4 hours in. My CB radio crackled. Not unusual, but the static was strange. It wasn't the normal hiss. It was broken, almost rhythmic, like breathing. I figured maybe the cold was messing with the equipment. I tapped the mic and asked if anyone was out. There. No response, just that low static. I shrugged it off, but something about it put me on edge. I turned the radio down and kept driving. The road stretched ahead like a black ribbon cut through endless white. Snow was falling harder now, and the sky was that heavy gray that makes it impossible to tell what time it is. I checked my clock. 7:30 p.m. The darkness was already thick, my headlights carving tunnels through it. That's when I saw the taillights, faint red dots way up ahead. My first thought was relief. Finally, another vehicle. I wasn't as alone out here as I thought. I pressed the gas a little, figuring I'd catch up, maybe pass them. But the weird thing was, no matter how much I sped up, I didn't seem to get any closer. The taillights stayed exactly the same distance away. Bright enough to see, but too far to make out the car or truck they belonged to. I kept pushing, maybe up to 60 on a road I should have been doing 40 on, but those lights just hovered there. After maybe 15 minutes of this, I started to get that prickly feeling on the back of my neck. I backed off the gas and tried to steady my breathing. Maybe it was just a trick of the snow, or maybe the road was winding more than I realized. But then the lights blinked out. Just gone. No curve, no hill, no reason for them to vanish. 1 second they were there. The next the road was empty again, black stretching into white. My stomach dropped, and I gripped the wheel tighter than I needed to. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe. My eyes playing tricks, but I couldn't shake how real they had looked. About an hour later, my CB crackled again. This time, a voice. It was faint, like it was underwater, but I heard it. Stop. Just one word. That was it. I froze, my heart thudding so hard I thought I might black out. I grabbed the mic, hands shaking, and said, "Breaker, who is this?" Static. Then clear as day, the same voice, only louder. "Stop now." That was enough for me. I snapped the radio off completely. My mouth was dry and I felt sweat even, though the cab was freezing. I kept telling myself it was interference, maybe someone messing around on the channel. But in the middle of nowhere, in the dead of night, it didn't add up. I kept going, but now every mile felt heavier. The snow was coming down harder, sticking to the windshield, wipers struggling to keep up. I slowed to a crawl, maybe 30, just to be safe. That's when my headlights caught something on the side of the road. A figure, standing there in the snow. At first I thought maybe it was a stranded driver, but as I got closer, my gut twisted. The figure wasn't moving. Not waving, not walking, just standing. They were tall, too. Taller than most men, with this strange shape to their shoulders, like they were hunched or wearing something heavy. I couldn't make out a face, just the outline against the snow. I wanted to stop. I really did. The human. Part of me screamed that maybe someone needed help, but something deeper, some primal part of me, told me not to. Every instinct I had said, "Do not stop this truck." So I didn't. I kept going, hands locked on the wheel, eyes fixed straight ahead. As I passed, I couldn't help but glance in the mirror. That's when I nearly slammed the brakes. The road behind me was empty. No footprints in the snow, no figure. Just the road, swallowed up by falling white. I didn't sleep that night. I drove straight through until I hit the next small town. Pulled into a diner, stumbled inside, and just sat there shaking with a cup of coffee. A couple of locals looked at me like I'd seen a ghost. And maybe I had. To this day, I don't know what I saw. I don't know what was on that radio, or whose taillights those were, or how someone could vanish into nothing in the middle of an Alaskan highway. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe the snow playing tricks. But I can tell you, I've driven every kind of road in this country, and I've never felt fear like that again. And the worst part, a week later, another driver I know took that same route. He never made it to Fairbanks. They found his truck on the side of the road, engine still running. Door wide open. No sign of him anywhere. I haven't set foot on that stretch of highway since, and I never will. I worked as a park ranger for about 7 years, stationed mostly in remote areas across the Pacific Northwest. People think the job is just hiking and pointing tourists toward trails, but when you're posted way out in the backcountry, it's a whole different life. It's quiet, lonely, and sometimes, if you're not careful, the silence can get to you. This happened about 5 winters ago, and I've never been able to explain it. I'd been assigned to a remote fire lookout tower, basically a wooden cabin on stilts with a wide view over the forest canopy. The only way in was a snowmobile trail that took about 2 hours from the nearest ranger station. My job was simple: monitor the area, log weather changes, check for smoke or illegal activity, and radio in my reports twice a day. It was early December, snow already thick on the ground. The forest out there in winter feels like another planet. Just endless white, muffled silence and trees so heavy with snow they sag like they're bowing. I didn't mind it. I liked the solitude. At least I thought I did. The first few days were uneventful. I chopped wood, made coffee, filled out my logs. The tower creaked when the wind howled, but that was normal. Nights were long, though. It gets dark around 4:30, and when you're up there with nothing but a lantern and the sound of your own breathing, you start noticing things you'd normally ignore. It was the 4th night when I heard it. I was lying in my bunk, half asleep, when a faint knocking sound woke me. At first I thought it was just a branch hitting the side of the tower. But then it came again. 3 knocks. Even, deliberate. I sat up, heart pounding, listening. The wind had died down. The forest was so still it hurt my ears. Then, after what felt like forever, another 3 knocks. This time from the opposite side of the tower. I tried to tell myself it was just wood shifting in the cold, but deep down, I knew better. The knocks weren't random. They were measured, like someone trying to get my attention. I grabbed my flashlight and swept it through the windows, down at the snow below. Nothing, just white ground and black trees. No footprints, no movement. Eventually, the sound stopped, and I convinced myself I was imagining it. I went back to bed, but I didn't sleep much. The next morning, I did my rounds outside. The snow was undisturbed, smooth as glass. No tracks of animals, no signs of anyone. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been there. That night, the knocks came again, this time louder. 4 knocks, slow and deliberate. Then silence. Then 5 knocks. I froze in my bunk, clutching the flashlight but too afraid to move. The sound came from directly under the floor, like someone was climbing the stilts of the tower. My hands were shaking so bad I nearly dropped the light. I forced myself to look out the trapdoor that led to the stairs. Empty. The knocking stopped, but the silence that followed was worse. My own breath felt deafening. I didn't sleep at all that night. The following day I tried radioing it in. My transmission went through, but the line was filled with static so bad they couldn't make out what I was saying. "Repeat that," the dispatcher kept asking, until finally the radio just cut out completely. Dead. I told myself the weather was messing with the signal, but the paranoia was eating me alive. I stayed inside all day, avoiding the windows. That night, it escalated. Around 2 a.m., I woke to the sound of footsteps circling the tower. Slow crunches in the snow, one after another. My chest tightened, and I could barely breathe. I sat in the dark, clutching my rifle, listening as the footsteps went around and around. Then, they stopped. Right at the base of the stairs, I aimed. The rifle at the trapdoor, sweat dripping down my face despite the cold. Minutes passed like hours. Then, the knocking returned. Not on the walls this time, but directly on the trapdoor. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. I couldn't take it anymore. I shouted, "Who's out there?" My voice cracked. No response, just silence. Then, after a long pause, the sound of someone climbing down the stairs, slow and steady, until the footsteps faded into the forest. I didn't sleep again. The next morning, I packed up my gear and left. I didn't care about protocol. I got on my snowmobile and drove back to the main station, hands stiff on the handlebars, heart racing the whole way. When I told my supervisor what had happened, he just stared at me. After a long silence, he said, "You know you were the only one out there, right? We didn't send anyone else into that section." "Too much snow." I nodded, but I didn't argue. I knew what I heard. I knew those knocks weren't my imagination. I haven't taken a backcountry assignment since. And here's the part that still chills me. 2 weeks later, another ranger was sent to the same tower. He never radioed in. They found the place empty. Snowmobile parked outside, gear inside, lantern still burning. No sign of him anywhere. The knocks weren't just in my head. I've been flying bush planes in Alaska for almost 15 years. Most of my runs are cargo hauls or short hops between remote villages. Nothing glamorous, just keeping people supplied with medicine, mail, and the kind of groceries you can't get out there unless someone flies them in. I love it. The freedom, the views. But I've also learned the hard way that the Alaskan wilderness doesn't forgive mistakes. What happened to me one night still keeps me awake sometimes, staring at the ceiling and wondering if it really happened the way I remember. It was January, deep winter, the kind of cold that makes metal groan and your breath freeze on the inside of your mask. I'd taken a late flight out of Bethel, heading toward a village on the Kuskokwim River. It should have been routine. 2 hours, clear skies, calm winds. My Cessna had been serviced just the week before. The first hour was fine. The sky was pitch black, but the stars were blazing, and the aurora was curling green across the horizon. Beautiful, the kind of view that makes you forget how dangerous it is to be alone up there. My radio chatter was dead quiet, though. Usually I'd pick up at least one other pilot or some station noise, but it was just static. Not unusual, I told myself. Then, about 40 minutes in, I noticed something strange. A light. Off my left wing, maybe half a mile away. At first I thought it was another aircraft, but the thing was, it wasn't blinking. Just a steady pale white light hovering in the dark. I radioed, "Aircraft at my 9 o'clock, identify." Static. No response. I kept flying, but the light kept pace with me. Not moving closer, not falling behind, just matching me. I checked my instruments, wondering if maybe I was catching some kind of reflection or glare. But everything looked fine. Still, my skin was crawling. I tried radioing again. "This is November 6-2, Mike. Confirm visual on nearby traffic." Nothing. Just that hollow hiss of static. That's when the radio changed. At first I thought it was more static, but then I realized it had a rhythm, like breathing. Slow, shallow breaths crackling through the speakers. My heart stopped. I yanked the headset off, but the sound kept bleeding faintly out of the unit itself, like it didn't matter whether I was wearing it or not. I killed the radio completely. The cockpit went silent except for the hum of the engine. I forced myself to focus. Just another 90 minutes and I'd be on the ground. But the light outside, it was still there. After another 10 minutes, it started moving. Not away from me, but in front. Slowly drifting until it was hovering dead ahead of my nose, just far enough that my landing lights couldn't catch it. I couldn't tell how big it was, or if it even had shape. Just this pale, ghostly glow pulling me forward. Thought about turning back, but fuel was tight, and the nearest airstrip behind me was already iced over. My only choice was forward. So I gritted my teeth, adjusted my heading, and tried to ignore it. That's when the instruments went haywire. First, the compass started spinning. Just a slow, lazy turn like it couldn't decide where north was. Then, the altimeter froze, stuck at 2,500 feet no matter how much I climbed or descended. The engine sputtered once, a dry cough that nearly stopped my heart, but kept going. I'd had failures before, but never all at once like that. My backup systems were fine, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't mechanical. Something was interfering. I looked up. The light was gone. For a second, I felt relief. But then I realized the sky ahead was darker than it should have been. Like a hole in the stars, a patch of nothing. No aurora, no glow, just black. I tightened my grip on the yoke and muttered, "Just keep flying, just keep flying." I don't know how long I stared into that patch of darkness, but eventually the radio came alive again. Not static this time. A voice. At first it was so faint I thought I imagined it. A whisper, broken and garbled. "Stop. Turn back." I froze. "Say again?" I asked, even though I didn't want to hear the answer. "Stop. Turn back." The voice was mine. I swear to God it was my own voice on that radio. I nearly lost control of the plane right then. My stomach dropped. My hands shook so bad the yoke was jerking. I screamed into the mic, "Who is this?" Silence. And then, laughter. Not loud, not cartoonish, just soft, breathless laughter, like someone trying not to be heard. I shut the radio. Off again. My whole body was trembling. When I looked up, the light was back, only this time it was closer. Much closer. I couldn't see details, just a blinding glow right above my nose, flooding the cockpit with white. My instruments flickered, then died completely. Even the engine noise seemed to fade, like I was being swallowed in silence. I don't remember what happened next. I must have blacked out because the next thing I knew, I was on the ground. The plane was parked neatly on the strip outside the village, engine off, gauges normal. The locals said they found me slumped over in the cockpit, still strapped in, an hour after I was supposed to land. To this day, I don't know how I landed that plane. I don't remember descending, don't remember lining up on the runway, nothing. Just that blinding light, and then nothing. I've flown since then, but I refuse to take night runs anymore. And every time I hear static on the radio, I get chills, because sometimes if I listen close enough, I swear I can still hear it. My own voice, whispering back at me. I used to work as an emergency dispatcher in a tiny Alaskan town. Not the kind of place with constant action. Most of my shifts were quiet. Drunk calls, the occasional snowmobile accident, sometimes a cabin fire when someone got careless with their wood stove. Nothing like the big city. I liked it that way. Peaceful, simple. But one winter, I worked a string of night shifts that nearly made me quit for good. It was January, dead of winter, and we were in the middle of a blizzard that lasted almost 4 days. The whole town was shut in, roads buried, power flickering. Everyone huddled around wood stoves. Nights in that little dispatch center got lonely. Just me, the radio static, and the snow piling against the windows. The first call came in around 2:15 a.m. The line was full of static, but I could hear someone breathing. At first I thought it was a pocket dial. "It happens," I said. 911. "What's your emergency?" No response, just slow, steady breathing. Then a voice, faint but clear. "He's at the door." I sat up straight, instantly alert. "Who's at the door? Can you give me your address?" Nothing. Just more static. Then the line went dead. I pulled up the call log. The number showed as unknown. That wasn't unusual for certain satellite phones out here, but there was no location data, nothing I could trace. I radioed the patrol officer, told him to keep an eye out for any distressed callers. But with the roads buried, there wasn't much he could do. An hour later, another call. Same number, same static. This time, the voice whispered, "He's inside." My blood ran cold. "Who's inside? Are you in danger? Can you give me your name?" No response. Just a faint thud in the background, like footsteps on wood. Then the line cut. I logged it, tried not to panic. Could have been a prank, I told myself. Bored kids with a radio, maybe. But my gut told me otherwise. The third call came around 4 a.m. This time the voice was crying. Not loud, but soft, broken sobs. Between them, words. "He's upstairs. Don't let him find me." I gripped the phone so tight my knuckles ached. "Stay on the line. I'm sending help. Just tell me where you are." But the line died again. I didn't sleep after that shift. I couldn't. The next night, same thing. Calls starting around 2 a.m., always the same voice. A woman, whispering, sometimes crying, always talking about him. First at the door, then inside, then closer. I started dreading the clock striking 2. I'd sit there, staring at the phone, waiting for it to ring. When it did, my heart would pound so hard I thought it might burst. On the third night, the call was different. The voice wasn't whispering anymore. It was screaming. "He's here! He's here! Oh God! He's—" The line cut mid-sentence. Jumped out of my chair, pacing the room, running my hands through my hair. I radioed the patrol again, begged him to drive through the storm, check any cabins on the outskirts. He tried, but the roads were still impassable. By the fourth night, I was half out of my mind with dread. Sure enough, 2:10 a.m., the phone rang. I answered with shaking hands, but this time there was no voice, just silence, and then knocking. 3 slow knocks, echoing through the line. I held the receiver away from my ear, staring at it like it might bite me. My throat was dry. I whispered, "Who is this?" No answer. Just 3 more knocks. Louder. And then a voice. Right. In my ear, so clear it made me jump out of my chair. "He's behind you." I spun around so fast my headset yanked out of the console. The room was empty. Just me, the dim light, and the snow slamming against the windows. I didn't answer another call that night. I just sat there, clutching my knees, waiting for dawn. When the storm finally passed, I checked with the phone company, begged them to trace the number. They looked into it, but their report left me cold. The calls hadn't come from a satellite phone. They hadn't come from anywhere. The log showed those calls were made from inside the dispatch center, my own line. Back when I was younger and dumber, I took seasonal jobs all over Alaska. Fishing boats, logging camps, odd construction gigs, anything that paid. One winter, I signed on with a small outfit that was contracted to clear equipment from an abandoned mining site deep in the interior. Supposedly, the company had gone bankrupt in the 80s, left a bunch of gear behind, and now someone had finally bought the rights and wanted it cleaned up. It was supposed to be a 3-week job. Just me and 3 other guys, living in a prefab bunkhouse, hauling scrap out during the day, radioing back to town once a week for check-ins. No big deal. But the second we got there, I felt off. The place was 30 miles from the nearest road, just a clearing of rusted sheds, collapsed wooden beams, and the black mouth of the mine itself. The snow made it worse. All the buildings half buried, their shapes wrong, like hunched figures frozen mid-step. Even the bunkhouse creaked like it didn't want us inside. The first night was fine. We cooked beans on the stove, played cards, laughed about the isolation. But when I turned in, I couldn't shake the feeling that the place wasn't as empty. As it looked, around 3 a.m., I woke to a sound. Not the wind, not the creak of the bunkhouse. It was knocking. Slow, heavy knocks echoing through the walls. At first I thought one of the guys was playing a prank, but when I peeked out, they were all asleep. The sound seemed to be coming from underground, from the mine. The next day, I mentioned it. They laughed, told me old mines shift and groan. Wood beams cracking under the weight of snow. I wanted to believe that, but I'd swear the knocking had a rhythm, almost like someone striking the walls with purpose. That night, it came again, louder. 3 knocks, a pause, then 3 more. By the third night, the others were hearing it too. We sat around the stove trying to laugh it off, but nobody was smiling. One of the guys, Dave, swore he saw a figure standing at the tree line, watching us as the sun went down. Just a shape, too far to make out. We searched, nothing but snow and trees. On the 5th day, we finally had to go into the mine. Our job was to strip out whatever equipment was salvageable. We strapped on headlamps and went down. The air was freezing, damp and thick with dust. Every step echoed too loud. The walls dripped, beams sagged, and the deeper we went, the worse the knocking sounded. Not faint anymore, clear, sharp, like it was coming from further down, ahead of us, probably ice cracking, one of the guys muttered. But he didn't believe it, and neither did I. We reached an old chamber where mining carts still sat rusting on the tracks. Our breath fogged in our lamps. Then, clear as day, we heard it. Voices, faint but unmistakable. A man's voice, then another, echoing up from the tunnels ahead. Not words we could understand, just murmurs. We froze, looked at each other. Nobody said a thing. Then from the dark, a single voice rang out. Get out. That was enough. We bolted, left our tools behind, scrambled up the shaft until daylight hit us like salvation. We didn't go back in. Not once. We tried to stick it out in the bunkhouse, but none of us were sleeping. The knocks got louder each night, closer, like something was moving up from the mine toward us. On the 8th night, I swear I heard footsteps circling the bunkhouse. Slow crunches in the snow, stopping right outside the door. We held our breath, rifles in hand until morning. When we finally opened the door, there were no tracks. Just smooth, untouched snow. The others wanted to bail, but the company had paid us up front, and we were stubborn, so we stayed. Big mistake. On the 10th night, Dave vanished. He'd gone out to the outhouse and never came back. We searched for hours in the snow, yelling his name, checking the tree line. Nothing. No tracks leading away. No sign of struggle. Just gone, like the night swallowed him whole. After that, we left. Packed what little gear we had and hiked out before dawn, abandoning the whole job. The company was furious, but I didn't care. I wasn't going back. Here's the part that keeps me up at night. A month later, search and rescue went out to the mine, looking for Dave. They never found him, but they did find something else. Fresh boot prints leading down into the mine. The problem was, the prints matched Dave's boots exactly. And they weren't a month old. They were fresh. Like he'd just walked in.